Hello, everybody. Scott Roberts here with Explore Scientific, and we have with us today Doug Arion and Rick Feinberg, two individuals who've done a tremendous amount of educational outreach, going back many decades into astronomy. Rick, of course, involved with Sky and Telescope magazine, is editor-in-chief, I believe, is the was the role, right? And Doug Arion is a professor at the University of Carthage. He's a professor of entrepreneurship, but also astrophysics and astronomy, I believe. And anyways, these are just two of the individuals who were involved in the all-volunteer group that developed the Galileoscope during that became a cornerstone project during the International Year of Astronomy in 2009. The Galileoscope, which you see here, that I have mounted on a tripod that we could talk about a little bit later, is a telescope kit that's been put together by people all over the world. Hundreds of thousands of them sold, and it's still available today. So, but it has amazing stories behind it, and so I'll turn this over to you two, and you can tell this story.
All right. Thanks a lot for having us today, Scott. It's great to be here. I'm glad we're able to do it. So are you showing my PowerPoint slides?
I can. We can go jump in. Good. You ready to go?
Yeah. I'll tell the early history of how this project came about. It's kind of a fun story. It actually starts in Prague, Czech Republic, back in 2006 at the International Astronomical Union General Assembly. That event is famous because of the bad news that came out of it, which is that the International Astronomical Union voted, as you see here in this picture, to declassify Pluto. It's no longer a planet, right? Now it's a dwarf planet. Although I've never understood how a dwarf planet cannot be considered a planet, because it just means a small planet. But anyway, that was the bad news that came out of that meeting in Prague. The good news was that the astronomical community decided that 3 years hence, in 2009, they would put on a global celebration called the International Year of Astronomy, with the theme, "The Universe, Yours to Discover." Now, the rationale behind this was that 2009 would be the 400th anniversary of Galileo's introducing the telescope to astronomy. Galileo didn't necessarily invent the telescope, but he was the first to turn it to the heavens and publicize what he found when he looked through it. So the question came up, well, what should be the focus of the IYA 2009 celebration? And it seemed so obvious to me. I stood up and I said, the focus of the celebration should be giving as many people as possible their first view of the night sky through a telescope. And everybody looked at me like, well, yeah, that's absolutely right. And so they then, put me in charge of it, me and my big mouth, right? So now I had to figure out, this was now 2006, right? So I had 3 years to figure out, how am I going to create an inexpensive but decent quality telescope that can be distributed by the gazillions all over the world so that people can have their first view through a telescope. So me and the folks I was working with, an international group, decided that we wanted to do a telescope kit, if possible, though we would sell a fully assembled telescope if it came to that. But we were hoping we could do a kit that would serve educators indoors so that kids could actually figure out how telescopes work, learn something about optics and image formation, but that would also work outside under the stars and give kids a wow experience. And not just kids, but of course their parents, their teachers, their friends, etc. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel, so we started looking around. We knew there were some telescope kits out there. The ones that are pictured here, the one on the from Project STAR had been used by teachers for years. A little cardboard tube telescope with plastic lenses. The two in the other photo, Starbook and Spica, were Japanese products that were actually really high quality. And then there were lots and lots of toy telescopes, department store telescopes, and so on. We had a crazy goal to try to bring in a telescope at a price of order $10, because we didn't want it just to work in the U.S. We wanted it to work all over the world, and in many places, of course, $10 is like a king's ransom. So we evaluated all these telescopes, boxes and boxes of them, and we decided that nothing was going to work. Everything was either too expensive or too hard to assemble or couldn't be mounted securely so that you could aim it, or it had decent mechanics but poor optics, or great optics but poor mechanics. So we decided we needed to create something ourselves. So the three of us that ended up doing most of the work are the three of us here in this picture. There's me, and there's Doug in the middle. And the guy on the left is Steve Pompey, who's a science education and optics expert at the National Optical Astronomy Observatory in Arizona. So it started out with Steve and me, and we were puzzling over how we would actually pull this off. We came up with our plan, we knew what we wanted, but we couldn't figure out exactly how to get it done. And then we were talking at a American Astronomical Society meeting in 2008 when this guy that neither of us knew sauntered up to us. Turned out to be Doug Arian, and he introduced himself as a physicist and astronomer, but more to the point for this discussion, someone who was also a professor of entrepreneurship and had lots and lots of ties to business and industry. And Doug said, I can help you get this thing manufactured and distributed. So now it was a team of three of us. And you can see us with a prototype back in 2008 in that picture. And with Doug's help, we created a company, Galileoscope, and got to work. And, make a long story short, we created the Galileo Scope Kit, which you see here. We were able to produce a kit that has great optics and is very easy to build, doesn't require tools, doesn't require glue or screws or anything. We had the assembly instructions translated into lots of different languages, so it would work worldwide. One of the fun little things that we did was we had it accept 1 1/4 inch standard commercial telescope eyepieces, so that if you want to try a really fancy, expensive, wonderful wide field eyepiece with this telescope, you can do that. And we made it fit on any standard photo tripod. So that's what the kit looks like. It takes about 5 minutes to build. Once you've done it a few times, might take a little longer the first time. This was a picture that our factory in China sent us. Here's the first batch showing up. Quite amazing. One of many, many truckloads that ended up going out. Here's proof that the optical quality is good. There's a first quarter moon shot through a Galileoscope just with a little digital camera held up to the eyepiece. Not bad. And here was a group of amateurs and educators and kids at a congress in Chile during the International Year of Astronomy with their first delivery of Galileoscopes. Here's students at a school experimenting with looking at distant objects and figuring out how to use a telescope. Here's some shots from some workshops that were held with teachers in Hawaii. Doug's been involved with those, also in Thailand, other places they've been held all around the world. This is one of my favorite images. This shows the numbers of Galileoscopes that were distributed during the International Year of Astronomy. It was getting close to 200,000. And You'll notice the United States was the biggest, but there's some surprises in there. Norway took a huge number. Brazil took a huge number. At the end of the International Year of Astronomy, we thought we'll fold up our tent, but people insisted that this thing was so useful and so worthwhile in schools especially that they asked us to try to keep it in production, which we managed to do. We got another boost in 2015 when the physics community named 2015 the International Year of Light, and that certainly meant, well, how are you going to deal with light if you're an astronomer? You're going to look at it with a telescope. So we were able to get another big boost of sales in 2015. We've now distributed more than 250,000 to more than 108 different countries around the world. Now, at this point, we really were ready to throw in the towel. Doug and I had been working at this for more than a decade, and we started looking around. Is there anybody out there who would be willing and able to take this project on, keep the telescope in production, and enable it to go forward? Because Doug and I, we're close to retirement, and we had, put more than a decade of effort and some of our own funding into it. And then Scott Roberts turned out to be the guy we were looking for. And so we're very happy that Explore Scientific is now the manufacturer and distributor of the Galileoscope. The first batch has been produced. The first sales are underway. Thousands of kits are being sold again every year, which is fantastic. And so that's where we are now. So we still have our Galileoscope.org website, but if you want to buy the thing, you link out to Explore Scientific. If you're an educator, you work in a planetarium or something like that, you can buy them in bulk at a discount. And now I will quiet down a little bit, and maybe Doug has a few key points he'd like to make, and then we can resume the discussion.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, this is a very fun project to do, and it is a very fortuitous thing that our little group was able to come together, because I'm a telescope maker and a physics and astronomy educator, and somebody who's been in industry and helped set up companies and so on. So it really was a perfect combination, and working with Rick for this last decade and a half has been fantastic. The partnership has been absolutely perfect to be able to do the development, do the sale, manage all of the money and all of the incredibly complicated things that go into actually pulling off this project. And the Galileoscope really is a very interesting project, because being international, we had to address all sorts of interesting issues in terms of actually making it compatible with where anybody was, being able to actually ship them to all these different places. One of the things that Rick did mention that we did during the IYA was we had a buy one, give one program. So over 7,000 of these were donated. And so we sent containers of telescopes to South Africa, where they were distributed through sub-Saharan Africa at no cost to anybody there. But you learn important things like, well, how many telescope kits can you get in a container, and which size containers can go to which countries, and which countries have tariffs and duties that you have to deal with. And we ran warehouses in Hong Kong, in Wisconsin in the States, and in Copenhagen to be able to deliver quickly to customers all around the world. So it was a very major business operation, getting it going and operating all of it, and to get 260,000 of these in 110 countries is something we're very, very, very proud of, and super pleased that Explorer is taking this on to keep it going. They're in a position to make this available to lots of people in lots of places. So it's been an interesting history. There are all sorts of detours and problems and things that came up, and if anybody's interested, I'll be happy to tell you all the various horror stories that happen when you run a small business on your own.
Right. One of the things I find very, very interesting is that although you solved all these problems of distribution, you got a product launched, I've been through this process many times myself. One of the things that you didn't really have to do is a traditional marketing model. I didn't see full page ads for this thing. I didn't, there was, of course, there was the website, but this was sold largely through educational channels. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, we did have some ads at
That's
the very
correct.
beginning. We were able to get some like Astronomy and Sky and Telescope, the Reflector, popular magazines in astronomy were willing to give us some free ad space early on because of the IYA celebration. But after 2010, no, we didn't have any more advertising, free or otherwise. It basically was word of mouth. So you could imagine, if it were promoted traditionally, through advertising, through social media, through all kinds of other things, the potential, given that we sold 250,000 without, any real marketing, you can imagine what the potential sales are, over time with better marketing. Yeah.
So a couple of things that helped here is that because Rick and I are respectively known within certain aspects of the astronomy community, being able to send notes to publications to get them to mention us. So, I mean, it was more done through publicity than it was done through advertising, but even that was very minimal and only happened for a short period because, we didn't have any money. Part of the issue here was we wanted to, as Rick mentioned, the goal was to get as many of these out as possible, and particularly into the hands of people who could not afford, conventional commercial telescopes.
Right.
And so we couldn't put in enough of a profit margin into those to be able to afford to advertise. So, if you look at what a full-page ad in Scientific American would cost, that would, that ad alone would pay for producing 5,000 telescopes, that kind of thing. So your choice is either you spend that money to put 5,000 telescopes into people's hands, or you spend it on an ad which you hope generates 10 or 15,000 units. And one placement doesn't do that. So you need 3, 4, 5, 10 placements, and now you're to the point, it just doesn't work. So, we knew going into this that as a one-product social benefit company, we couldn't work that way, and that ultimately it needed to be taken on by somebody who already did advertising and marketing and promotion, because adding one product to an existing marketing scheme costs very little. Creating a marketing scheme costs a lot. And so, it's amazing that we got 260,000 of them out there, but having the IYA helped, having the IYL helped, being able to send notes to publishers of amateur astronomy and astronomy technology today and the Night Sky Network and these various places, because they know us as individuals and say, yeah, we'll at least mention this. And that's as far as you get. And, they can't keep mentioning you every month. So you get one mention, and then maybe the next year you get another mention. So it's not like we could really stay in front of people. But to the extent we could, we leveraged what was either totally free or extremely cheap,
right,
in order to get for the product.
There is one other thing I'd like to mention, which was that we did get a tremendous amount of support from Rick and Jean Edelman. Some folks might know Rick Edelman. He's a financial whiz. He gives financial advice. He's got a radio program. He's written some books. His wife Jean has written some books too. Because of Rick's interest in science education and the fact that Kevin Marvel, the executive officer at the American Astronomical Society, knew him, Rick decided to donate 15,000 telescopes during the IYA, which was a significant purchase. Half of them were given to science education organizations like the Astronomical Society of the Pacific and the Association of Science and Technology Centers, where they were used during teacher workshops and things like that. And then the other half were sold to school teachers, promoted through Rick's radio program, but they only had to pay for the shipping. They didn't have to pay for the telescopes because Rick had already bought them. And then when the International Year of Light came along, Rick did another 10,000.
Wow.
So he himself is responsible for 10% of the grand total that we've distributed, and his support was huge to us. And in fact, he just recently, to celebrate Explore Scientific taking over the project and keeping it going, he mentioned it on his radio program again. And I know, Scott, that you've been getting some orders as a result of that.
We got a tremendous number of orders. So the power of Rick Edelman and his show, and obviously the fact that this guy is so well respected
But
must all add up to some very positive reinforcement for things that he gets involved with. I notice Rick does many other philanthropic types of things, so it's and I didn't see him. You don't see him really waving his flag about it, but he's involved in many, many ways to help out initiatives that he feels is important, and education is one of them. So
absolutely.
right,
Yeah,
so
he's even, I think he endowed the planetarium at his alma mater, which is now named after him. So, yeah, he's very much into education, science education, financial smarts, street smarts, money smarts. That's his thing, is to make sure people approach, life, especially, things that really matter, like managing your finances and managing your health and all that, with evidence-based science. So, yeah, we really, really appreciate all that he's done for us.
absolutely. Now, there were other people involved in this. You mentioned Mike Pompeo, but or excuse me,
Steve Pompeo.
Steve Pompeo. Sorry, guys.
It's Pompeo, actually. He pronounces it Pompeo. The Pompeo is the Secretary of State, unfortunately.
Maybe I've been watching.
Yeah,
But,
Mike, if you're listening,
yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
but I would say that all of them had a very important role. Who else was on this team?
Well,
So the group that I brought in to do this, there was a local company, relatively local, was on campus at Carthage in Wisconsin. In Racine, the next town over, was a company named Merit Models, which was run by a guy named Tom Smith. And prior to this project, I had worked with them to help them set up manufacturing operations in China. So when this project came up, it was a perfect call them up and say, hey, I've got a big project that you can take on. And so he was instrumental in working with us to do the detailed design work for the actual manufacturing, the design of the tooling, the manufacturing. The timing for this could not have actually been worse, because while we're looking at a major economic problem right now, the last one was in 2008, which was exactly when we were doing this, and we had been told by the IAU and folks that there were going to be all sorts of corporate sponsors and national sponsors who were going to buy zillions of these things, and money was going to be just flowing out, all of which stopped. And so it really came down to Rick and myself to fund getting the tooling made and getting the first productions made and then buying future inventories. We're very pleased that over the life of the project, we eventually got our money out, but we basically funded the project on our own. The Merit Models,
we have very understanding
part of this, to do that actual tooling design and be able to get production going. So through another economic development group that I worked with, I was also familiar with Lehman USA, which is an intermodal transportation company, and sat down with them, and they were able to do not just our transportation from factory to warehouse and just the order control, but we integrated with them for our order satisfaction. So we were able to take our orders on our website, have that electronically go to them, and then they would do our shipping for us. Wonderful. And then send me humongous invoices every month that I got to pay. Right. And then to put our website together and the whole e-commerce. Remember, e-commerce was not a big thing when you're looking at, this is quite a while ago, right? This is 15 years, 20 years ago when we first started putting this together. But I had a colleague at Muhlenberg College who taught computer science and was doing all sorts of new kinds of database and web development. So I called him up and said, hey, would you do a project for us to help us get an e-commerce site up that will talk the software at Lehman? And so he put that together. And so it was one of those things with knowing enough people who could do enough different things. And of course, having run companies, I already had an accounting firm and a legal firm that I could call up to do those parts of spinning up and running the company. So all of those were involved in getting this going and making it work. and getting 250,000 units out there. But you need all of those people. And working with Tom, I mean, one of the interesting things here, when you're trying to keep the cost down, there are a lot of design features, little things you can that control costs or improve the rate of production off the machine, yeah, how it's going to be packaged, which affects how many units can go in a container, which affects what your transportation costs are. So being able to work with all of those pieces is really critical for putting out a product like this on the scale that we were doing it.
That's right. That's right. Yes. We run into the same things when we're placing product, whether it's a mass market retailer or a specialty retailer. All of those things come into play every time. And so, you're trying to drive a product through. You take its original vision of what it's supposed to be and what it's supposed to do, and you try to drive it through all of that, And it's amazing that any product actually gets to the public after.
I know. When I think about Doug, every time I hear Doug talk about this, he reminds me of some of the things that I think I've deliberately forgotten about how hard this was. And it really was amazing that we were able to pull this off. And it was a labor of love, but it was also an incredible amount of work. The idea that the community, both the astronomical community and the community of science educators, all but demanded that we keep this thing going, lets you know that it was really appreciated.
Yeah, that's right. Well, it's so interesting to hear the backstory because even as we were taking over the product, and by the way, I really want to say sincerely from the bottom of my heart, I am very, very honored that you guys chose Explore Scientific to do this. When you mentioned it to me, you could have just pushed me over with a feather. I was so honored that, because you could have asked many other people in this industry to be involved with this. I hope that we continue in the tradition that you have. I think that we largely do. And I'm glad that you're both involved in channeling educators back through to the company, and I think it's very important. And I hope that we can continue to add to what the Galileo Scope is, because it's a great product. I've used it myself. Some of my friends are buying them, and they have very big, expensive telescopes, but they believe in this product because they're using it for their educational outreach. It's really that spark to get someone started, and it doesn't have to be a massive telescope to do that. And I can't imagine all the sparks that you've created, with 250,000 telescopes.
Right.
People that put this together understand how those optics work, getting that Galileo experience, One
of the keys is that if somebody looks through a telescope for the first time and is disappointed, that's going to turn them off of astronomy.
Yes.
And so, the whole idea here was a telescope that when you look through it, you're going to be impressed by the view. Now, this isn't a telescope for looking at distant galaxies, but it's for looking at the things that Galileo himself looked at, the moon and the planets and bright star clusters, and and the view is really good, and people get very excited by it. There are a lot of kits out there and inexpensive department store type telescopes or toy telescopes that are low magnification and don't have good optics. The most expensive single component in this telescope is the front lens, the main lens, and that's because we decided the only way to get the optical quality we wanted was to use glass, that we could not do plastic. And so, we've heard a lot of the people say "wow" when they look through it, which is just exactly what we were after. And I want to say too that the reason we're with Explore Scientific is that you, Scott, personally are well known in the community, not just as a telescope manufacturer and dealer, but as someone who's played a big role in education and public outreach. You've supported the amateur astronomy community. You've put on events. You have a lot of science education related products already in your inventory. So, it just seems like the perfect fit. We're just so delighted that you're involved in this. And, you and I have known each other since we both were working at previous companies decades ago. And it's fun. It's fun to be, in this partnership all these years later.
Right. Well, I have incredible respect for both of you guys. And, I'm glad that you came online and could share your time this afternoon with all of us here on Facebook. This video will also go up on YouTube and will be on the Galileoscope website so that you can watch it again and you can understand, where the Galileo Scope came from. But it really still has a 400-year-old plus story, and it's still going on today. And so, I guess I'll end it here. But thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Much. And
It's been fun.
I promised that I would talk a little bit about this tripod here. We talked about the Galileo Scope does not have a tripod, but I did find something out of our product line, and it is designed for a 50 millimeter refractor, but it works with the scope very well. And they are available for $25, that you can buy either separately or you can buy with a Galileo Scope. So lightweight, portable, adjustable height, metal tripod stand. And but there's some other cool ways of mounting the Galileo Scope, and you can see it on the Galileoscope.org website. So, all right. So this evening I'll be working with Marcelo Souza down in Brazil. He has me on to give a talk to his astronomy groups down there on Astropapo, I think is how it's pronounced, but it's in English it's Astro Talk. So
Super.
We have more programs coming up on Explore Now as well. So stay tuned and thank you for watching. Bye-bye.
Great to be with you today. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks a lot, Scott.
Bye-bye.
Great.